Wow, welcome back. I'm so glad you stayed with me up till this point, and we are in for something mind blowing. Now, I want us to take a close look at addiction again as a coping technique. Almost all of the times, most of us are battling with things other than that to which we are addicted. For many of us, we are battling with fear, and every time this fear of the unknown, this depressing fear comes upon us, we are helpless. We just need something that can induce us to sleep, so we go take drugs. We need something that can induce us not to be aware. The Bible talks about give strong drink to those who are perishing, that they may forget their sorrows. So for a lot of us, we are dealing with grief. It was a grieving period in our lives that led us into some kind of lifestyle. For some of us, we are dealing with betrayal. For some of us, we are dealing with insecurities. For some of us, we can't stand failure. We've tried something again and again, and we keep failing at it, and we can't stand it. We can't deal with it. For some of us, we are battling with loneliness. So many failed relationships, a failed marriage. You're a victim of divorce or betrayal or infidelity. Now you're battling with all that pain, including loneliness. Or you think that you are 40, you have no proposal, no marriage, nobody's asking you out. For a lot of us, we're battling with abuse. For some of us, it is the shock that a family member, an uncle, if your parent, anybody you looked up to, a role model, abused you, messed with you. You can't deal with that. You're losing your mind, and you need to do something about keeping your mind together. And before you know it, you spoke with the wrong person, you interacted with the wrong people, they gave you wrong suggestions, they got you involved with a community, a group of people, a school of thought, an ideology, and look at where you are. For some of us, it is poverty that's messing with us. For some of us, it is low self-esteem that came from abuse and came from all kinds of mistreatment by fellow humans, by people we looked up to. All of us, we're struggling with all kinds of things. And it's so important that you realize that you are, the things that you are doing is not necessarily your choice. You seem to be a victim of situations and circumstances such that these cravings for sex, these cravings for drugs, these cravings for masturbation, for pornography, these cravings for whatever you are craving, they are just the things you are using to cope. What can I suggest to you? Do you also realize that they might help you cope, but they don't deal with the real problems? They only provide temporary reliefs for you. But how about dealing with the problems themselves, so that you wouldn't need to get fixated on these other things? Now you're fixated on lifestyles that are damaging you because they are only creating amnesia for you. They are helping you forget your sorrow for how long? You forget your sorrow for an hour, you forget your sorrow for the night, and you wake up facing the same sorrow. Excuse me, we need to deal with the real problems and give you the capacity to overcome, overwrite, and defeat whatever those things are. This is so important. Instead of temporary reliefs, the focus of this class is to help you deal with the real issues. That's the way. No, that's the way to experience true freedom. And that's what this conversation is all about. Therefore, to deal with all this and to win, the next thing we must pay attention to is the logic of an addiction. You need to understand the way an addiction works. Everything I've explained so far defines this logic. But to summarize what this logic is, let me put it this way. Listen. In dealing with addictions and compulsions, we should start by identifying what it is that we are actually dealing with. That's where to start with. What is the pain that you're dealing with? What is it that you're running away from? It's important to itemize that. Number one. Number two, oftentimes you also think you are dealing with one addiction, but you have more than one that is providing support and life to the other. Listen, addictions are never solo. They are symbiotic. what becomes pronounced for people to see or for you to notice that depresses you might be one thing, but trust me, all of the times there are other attitudes, lifestyles, conditionings that are fueling and empowering that visible addiction. And until you identify those things, if you keep focusing on the obvious one, you will realize that even when you overcome the obvious for 1 week, you fall back to it because there are factors resurrecting it. This is so important. So to be holistic and to be thorough in dealing with addictions and compulsions, what is required is that we understand this logic, the logic of an addiction, that there are things. Number one, identify the needs, the real issues that are forcing and compelling you into that lifestyle. Number two is to identify what those things are that are providing the support system to your addiction. That's the simple logic. The logic is actually simple. An addiction does not and cannot stand alone. Addictions are never to be known to be loners. They are very polygamous in configuration and they are symbiotic in nature. So you must identify not just the addictive or compulsive action, but number one, what are the needs, the pain, the pleasure that is bringing them about? Number two, what are the triggers, the support system that is fueling it? This is so important. So those needs become the triggers that trigger your addiction. So you want to identify your triggers. Otherwise, when you think you have identified the problem and you have dealt with the problem, it bounces back. Because why? You cannot kill an action whose trigger is still subsistent and then claim to have done the job. And so while this brings us to the end of Module 1, it leads us to 2 exercises that requires your attention. So you want to go down to the exercises. The first exercise is the addiction drill. The second exercise is identifying your triggers. So follow the links provided. The addiction drill, provide the answers required. Identifying your triggers, provide the answers required. And then we're going to have our bespoke session one-on-one. And then we're going to be ready after that for Module 2. Thank you so much for being part of this class. I believe without a shadow of doubt that you're getting value and you're going somewhere with this. Thank you so much. Stay with me and I'll be right back for Module 2.